New details on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, improved cities are on the way, and new details about the World Hub. It's been a great week for news on Flight Sim with a ton of interesting details. Let's start then with the latest for Flight Sim 2024. Now, the latest wish lists show a few details of what we can expect to come in the new sim. I took a close look at the latest wish list and it has changed over previous ones, with a few features moving over from the current iteration of Flight Sim to the newer version. Now, here's a few of these: unrealistic airport lighting distances. Now, this is an issue that's been going on for a very long time. In fact, there's threads on the official forums dating all the way back to 2020. Essentially, this is all down to the airport lights and how visible they are at respective and relative distances from the airport. The latest wish list shows that this is planned to be fixed in Flight Sim 2024. Another long-anticipated feature are power lines, antennas, masts and cable cars. Now, many of you who have been following the wish lists for any length of time would have seen that this has consistently been on the wish list for many years at this point. We can see that this is now planned for Flight Sim 2024 Plus. The plus sign, very simply here, means that it's planned for this edition of the sim, or that new edition of the sim, but it won't be in on the release date. It will be coming slightly further down the line. The same is true for another highly anticipated feature, Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis. Now, the CEO of Asobo spoke about the Northern Lights quite some time back. He essentially explained that Asobo don't want to simply put in lights into the sim, Northern Lights, with them just being an asset. Instead, he wants them to work accurately, so essentially the light scattering through the Earth's magnetosphere, causing the disruptions, causing these light patterns. That's obviously a lot of work. Originally, it was hoped to be in for the current iteration of Flight Sim, but it's now planned for Flight Sim 2024 Plus. So again, not in a release, but further down the line. All of this shows then that plans are still very much up in the air for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, but also that Microsoft clearly intend for the new iteration of the sim to be a huge update over the current version. What we want to see then is a whole range of different activities and content to get involved with. And talking of games and sims with a whole range of content, here's a word from today's sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder features more than 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters and ships. Each and every vehicle is intricately detailed right down to the smallest of components, and all deliver captivating PvP combat, available for free right now on PC, Xbox and PlayStation. Now, military vehicles have always fascinated me, and with over 100 years of choice from the 1920s right up to today, there's a ton of options, all of which can be customized with 3D decorations and camouflage. A thing that really stands out to me with the game are the spectacular, impactful explosions, which are massively enhanced by the great sound effects and soundscape. Check the link in the video description right now to find out more, and for those who are new or haven't played for 6 months, claim the large bonus pack. Act fast, as the pack is available for a limited time. Moving our attention of focus back to Flight Sim 2020, we come to the cities. Now, over the years, there's been many world updates which have largely improved the various photogrammetry cities within the sim. That all changed somewhat though with World Update 11 and Canada. This update infamously delivered a whole bunch of very bad photogrammetric Canadian cities. In fact, this was so widely acknowledged that head of Microsoft Flight Simulator York Newman actually apologised for them and assured everyone that they would make sure they get corrected and updated. Well, that has now, to all intents and purposes, actually happened. The latest development update then says that these Canadian cities have now all been fixed and that they will be rolling out to users at some point in the not too distant future. Interestingly, the update also confirms that the team will be now moving on to other cities around the world. Of course, many of you will remember ages ago London also got an update, and that the photogrammetry for that is also rather bad. In fact, it's perhaps arguably one of the worst in the game in terms of accuracy. This is a city that in the past York Newman has also addressed, agreeing and acknowledging that yes, the photogrammetry is rather bad, and they promised an overhaul for London. That hasn't turned up just yet, but now they've fixed the Canadian cities, just maybe their attention will return once again to London. Now, if you're finding this video useful or interesting, please do consider liking and subscribing. This is something I don't ask all that often, but honestly it's something that helps the channel and the videos more than I can describe. Now, another interesting point in this week's dev update was the news for the World Hub, also known as the Scenery Gateway. We can see on screen a little bit right now how that is going to work. This is footage from around about November last year, which essentially shows us that players, simmers, will be able to dive in and modify all airports within the sim. The idea here is to bring the sim up to date and make all of these airports far more accurate. Of course, all of the corrections and changes will need to be submitted to Microsoft, but if and when approved, they will eventually be rolled out in a future patch. Now, the wait has been very long for the World Hub update, but finally Microsoft have said that work on this is now finished and that it's ready very soon to go into the alpha phase for testing. That means it's very likely we should be hearing more about this soon, which, well, hopefully will include a release date as well. Moving on, we come to atmospheric lighting improvements. Now this one I can kind of understand and kind of relate to, but it's really interesting when you consider the idea, the very notion of improving Microsoft Flight Simulator graphically. I remember, and you may remember too, back in 2019 when the game The Sim was first announced in that announcement trailer. The world was absolutely awed by the graphical quality of what was on display. Nothing like it had ever been seen before, and I really don't think that's an overstatement. This was followed by the content creators, YouTubers, getting a bit of a hands-on access to the sim and showing some footage as well, in some cases half hour or an hour's worth of footage, all of which looked absolutely stunning. Of course, when the simmers finally got hands-on with the sim, it turned out that yes, many of the areas were as good as they were shown in this official footage. But of course, there were other areas in the sim around the world which weren't quite up to scratch. But even still, it feels kind of weird sometimes to say that, well, Microsoft Flight Simulator could do with improving graphically. It perhaps just goes to show that over time, how many of us get very familiar with what we use day to day. Now that said, Asobo and Microsoft have confirmed that there is a new atmospheric lighting engine in the works. This will be coming primarily to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, but the existing lighting engine, atmospheric lighting engine within the 2020 edition is also getting some improvements. We saw some of that with the recent sim update, but Microsoft Asobo have confirmed that there's plenty more coming and that it's on track for sim update 14. Personally, I'm very curious to see what type of updates they're working on here and how that's going to affect the graphical quality of the sim overall. Obviously, atmospheric lighting is one of the big things that affects graphics pretty much universally. In fact, I'd go as far as saying that lighting is in the top 2 or 3 list for being one of the most important things that affects the visual appearance of any sim or game. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that turns out. Now, on the same note as graphics, I've seen over the years and over the last few months, quite a few people have pointed out about the grainy reflections we see in many areas of the sim, and this has long been asked to either be fixed or be improved. Unfortunately, Asobo and Microsoft have now confirmed that they have no plans to improve this or change it, so the reflections we've got, grainy or otherwise, are what we're going to be stuck with. There's also another area on the wish list that I wanted to point out, and this is the massive number of things that are now under investigation. A few of these really stood out to me. One of them is the Budapest elevation data, which a lot of people have said is not very good. This is something that's under investigation, so hopefully will get improved at a future date. There's also issues with intermittent mouse interactions. This is not something I've had myself any problems with, but apparently quite a few people have. Again, something that Microsoft and Asobo are looking into. And then we come to user-defined cloud layer densities. This is something that I have noticed that over time does seem to have changed. In the early days, clouds looked absolutely fantastic, and it was possible to create some really wonderful and amazing combinations with it. Today, for some reason, it seems, well, a little bit intermittent, and I don't seem to be able to achieve the same effects and the same combinations that I once could. This is something that Microsoft and Asobo are now looking into. At any rate, that brings us to the end of all the highlights from the dev update this week. The next few updates, the next few weeks rather, should be especially interesting, as at the end of October we should be getting a brand new roadmap indicating to us the next 3 months worth of content that we can expect to see in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that brings us. My thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Remember, do check out those links in the video description where you can find out everything that you need to know, including access to a free large bonus pack that's available for a limited time to new users and those who haven't played for 6 months.